July 26th, 1944. The hedgerows of Normandy, France. The air does not smell of pine or earth. It reeks of diesel fumes and burning cordite. The ground beneath the 2nd Armoured Division isn't just vibrating from artillery, it is trembling under the weight of a mechanical flood. Through the choking dust, the silhouette of an M4 Sherman tank smashes through a dense thicket, its Ford V8 engine roaring like a caged beast. Immediately behind it, a limitless column of GMC trucks stretches back to the horizon, carrying everything from 75mm shells to fresh socks. This is not merely an army on the march, it is an industrial city in motion. Just 5 years prior, this sight would have been scientifically impossible. In 1939, American soldiers were still training with wooden rifles and moving artillery with horse-drawn caissons. Yet, by this summer morning in France, the United States has achieved a logistical miracle, placing an entire war effort on rubber tires and steel tracks. To understand how the Allies paved the road to Berlin, we must first return to the moment the ignition was turned on. To comprehend the sheer scale of the American automotive juggernaut, one must first look at the hollow shell that preceded it. In September 1939, as German panzer divisions were rewriting the rules of warfare in Poland, the United States Army was essentially a constabulary force. It ranked roughly 17th in the world, smaller than the Army of Portugal, and possessed fewer than 400 tanks, most of which were obsolete light models armed only with machine guns. While the Wehrmacht operated on a doctrine of blitzkrieg, lightning war driven by radio coordination and mechanization, American doctrine was stagnant. During the Louisiana maneuvers of 1941, US troops were still so critically short of equipment that they used commercial delivery trucks with the word tank painted on their sides. Soldiers wielded broomsticks labeled machine gun. It was a military force unprepared for the industrial ferocity that was about to consume the globe. But beneath this unpreparedness lay a dormant giant, the American civilian automotive industry, which alone produced more cars than the rest of the world combined. The catalyst for change arrived not on the battlefield, but in the boardroom. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States government issued a directive that effectively ended the civilian automotive industry. In January 1942, the assembly lines of Detroit fell silent. No new cars would be produced for the duration of the war. Instead, the greatest industrial complex in human history was retooled for a singular purpose: total mechanization. Ford did not just build engines, they constructed the massive Willow Run plant to turn out B-24 Liberators. Chrysler, known for luxury sedans, began casting the hulls of tanks. General Motors became the world's largest military contractor, manufacturing everything from machine guns to cargo trucks. The American strategy diverged sharply from its European counterparts. While Germany built exquisite, over-engineered machines like the Tiger tank, mechanically complex and difficult to repair, the United States prioritized standardization, reliability, and mass production. The goal was not to build the perfect vehicle. The goal was to build a vehicle that could be repaired in a muddy field in Belgium by a 19-year-old mechanic using a wrench and a hammer. This philosophy of quantity and reliability would define the American war effort. It was a gamble that logistics could defeat tactical superiority. As 1942 turned into 1943, this gamble began to pay off, manifesting in a fleet of vehicles that would soon become the backbone of the Allied advance. If the soul of the American war effort had a physical form, it would not be a tank or a fighter plane. It would be a small, four-wheel drive reconnaissance car, the Jeep. Entering service in 1941, the Willys MB was an engineering marvel of simplicity. It had no doors, no windows, and a suspension that punished the spine. Yet it was arguably the most important tactical vehicle of the 20th century. General Dwight D. Eisenhower later listed it as one of the 3 tools that won the war. The Jeep was ubiquitous. It served as a command car, an ambulance, a machine gun platform, and even a chaplain's altar. Its low silhouette allowed it to hide behind ridgelines, while its 60-horsepower Go Devil engine could drag it through mud that swallowed German staff cars whole. It represented a fundamental shift in warfare: mobility for the individual soldier. For the first time, speed and reconnaissance were not tethered to the limitations of a horse. While the Jeep provided tactical mobility, strategic victory rode on the back of the GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, affectionately known as the Deuce and a half. This 6-wheel drive workhorse was the circulatory system of the Allied armies. Over 560,000 were built, creating a logistical capability that the Axis powers could never match. While the German army still relied heavily on rail lines and millions of horses to move supplies from depots to the front, the Americans built a rolling pipeline. The Deuce could carry troops, tow artillery, or haul 5,000 pounds of ammunition over broken terrain. Its impact was global. Through Lend-Lease, thousands of these trucks were sent to the Soviet Union, motorizing the Red Army and allowing them to sustain deep operations against the Wehrmacht. It was a victory of standardization. One truck, one set of parts, keeping the entire Allied coalition moving forward. But wheels alone could not break the enemy lines. For that, the Allies needed steel tracks. If the Jeep was the legs of the army, the M4 Sherman was its mailed fist. Yet no vehicle in World War II is more controversial. By 1944, German tanks like the Panther and Tiger arguably possessed superior armor and firepower. In a one-on-one duel, a Sherman was often at a disadvantage, leading to grim nicknames among crews regarding its flammability. However, the American strategy was never about winning duels. It was about winning wars. The Sherman was a masterpiece of logistical engineering. It was narrow enough to fit on standard flatbed rail cars and light enough to cross temporary Bailey bridges that would collapse under a Tiger's weight. Crucially, it was reliable. While German tank battalions often left half their strength behind due to mechanical breakdowns before even reaching the battlefield, Sherman divisions arrived intact. In the hedgerows of Normandy, for every Sherman the Germans destroyed, 2 more seemed to roll off the ships at Cherbourg. The Americans didn't just outfight the enemy, they outlasted them. While the Sherman dominated the fields of Europe, a different breed of machine was required for the island-hopping campaigns of the Pacific. Here, the boundary between sea and land vanished. Enter the LVT and the DUKW. The LVT, or Amtrak, was a terrifying hybrid, a boat with tracks that could claw its way over coral reefs and drive directly onto the beach, delivering Marines into the heart of the fire. Meanwhile, the DUKW, a 6-wheel drive amphibious truck, ferried supplies from offshore Liberty ships directly to inland depots without ever stopping. These strange, ungainly machines solved a tactical puzzle that had plagued commanders for centuries: the vulnerability of an army at the water's edge. With these vehicles, the United States didn't just cross oceans, they drove right out of them. But by the late summer of 1944, this massive mechanized force faced a new enemy, one more dangerous than the Germans, its own insatiable hunger for fuel. August 1944. The Allies had broken out of Normandy, and General George S. Patton's Third Army was tearing across France at a speed that defied military logic. But this success birthed a deadly crisis. Patton's tanks were consuming 350,000 gallons of gasoline every day. By late August, the advance ground to a halt, not because of German resistance, but because the fuel tanks were dry. The port of Cherbourg was simply too far away. The solution was an act of desperation and genius: the Red Ball Express. Authorized on August 25, 1944, this was a one-way loop road system restricted exclusively to supply convoys. For 82 days, nearly 6,000 trucks ran bumper to bumper 24 hours a day, never stopping for anything but breakdown or death. The drivers, 75% of whom were African American soldiers, pushed themselves beyond human endurance. They drove for 36 hours at a stretch, hallucinating from fatigue, navigating blackout conditions with only cat-eye slits on their headlights. These men and their GMC trucks delivered 12,000 tons of supplies daily, effectively keeping the Allied heart beating. It was a logistical feat that no other nation could have attempted, let alone achieved. But as winter descended, the German war machine prepared one final, desperate gamble to sever these lifelines. December 16th, 1944. Hitler launched Operation Wacht am Rhein, the Battle of the Bulge. The German objective was to capture the port of Antwerp and starve the Allied armies of fuel. Initially, the heavy German King Tigers crushed American lines, but the Wehrmacht had forgotten the lesson of 1918. Static power cannot defeat total mobility. In a maneuver that remains legendary in military history, General Patton turned the entire Third Army 90 degrees in less than 48 hours to relieve the besieged 101st Airborne at Bastogne. This was not a tactical victory, it was an automotive one. It was achieved by thousands of trucks, half-tracks, and tank retrievers moving men and equipment over icy roads at a tempo the Germans could not comprehend. While German panzers sat abandoned on the roadside, out of fuel, American columns kept rolling. By March 1945, the final barrier, the Rhine River, lay ahead. Here, the WKWs and LVTs returned, ferrying troops across the swift currents, while pontoon bridges were erected in record time. As the first M26 Pershing heavy tanks rolled across the Remagen Bridge, the reality became undeniable. The American industrial machine had not just defeated the German army, it had physically run them over. When the surrender documents were finally signed in Reims and Tokyo Bay, the United States possessed the most mobile army in the history of warfare. But peace brought an immediate and strange logistical paradox. In many cases, it was more expensive to bring the machines home than to leave them behind. The result was the creation of massive iron graveyards across the globe. In the Pacific, at locations like Million Dollar Point in Vanuatu, thousands of tons of equipment, jeeps, bulldozers, and 6x6 trucks were driven off piers directly into the ocean. Drivers would rig the accelerators, jump out at the last second, and watch as brand new vehicles sank into the coral depths, creating an underwater monument to industrial surplus. In Europe, vast fields in France and Germany became parking lots for thousands of decommissioned Shermans and half-tracks, stretching for miles, a silent, rusting testament to the sheer scale of American production. However, the narrative of the inexhaustible machine often overshadows the flesh and blood that operated it. The cost of maintaining this mechanical momentum was steep. The 3rd Armoured Division, known as the Spearhead, effectively lost its entire complement of tanks several times over, suffering over 1,300 vehicles destroyed or damaged during the European campaign. For the tank crews, the reality of the Sherman was terrifyingly visceral. While the tank was mechanically reliable, its high silhouette and vertical side armour made it a priority target for concealed German anti-tank guns. A report from the US Army Surgeon General noted that the psychological trauma for tank crews was unique. They were not just fighting the enemy, but the constant fear of being trapped inside a burning iron coffin. Yet these men and machines had achieved the impossible. They had motorized warfare itself. Beyond the immediate wreckage, the conflict cemented a fundamental shift in human history. World War II was the final nail in the coffin of the cavalry age. While the war had been won by the assembly line, and the peace would be defined by it. History records the names of generals and the strategies of marshals, attributing victory to human genius. Yet, the undeniable reality of World War II is that it was decided not just on the map tables, but on the assembly lines of Detroit, Flint, and Willow Run. It was a conflict where the romanticism of the warrior was finally crushed by the cold, hard logic of industrial capacity. The United States produced over 3.2 million vehicles during the conflict. The Axis powers, for all their tactical brilliance and engineering sophistication, simply could not compete with a nation that turned the production of war machines into a monotony of excellence. The American strategy was devoid of ego. It did not seek to build the best tank, but the right tank for a global war of attrition. Today, many of these machines rust in quiet fields across Europe and the Pacific, their olive drab paint fading under 80 years of sun and rain. But look closely at them. The Willys Jeep, the GMC truck, the M4 Sherman. They are the silent veterans of the crusade. They carried the food that fed the starving, the ammunition that liberated the oppressed, and the soldiers who broke the grip of tyranny. In the end, the story of US vehicles in World War II is the story of how a democracy aroused from slumber did not just equip an army, but placed the entire concept of freedom on wheels and drove it all the way to Berlin and Tokyo.